We live in a time in which we see a lot of either sequels to movies, requels, rebooted sequels, whatnot. I mean, this is kind of the era in which we're living in. You see it all the time. And sometimes there are always sequels that we are usually always optimistic about, especially when you hear the announcement and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this could potentially be good and could maybe either improve upon the other sequels or ignore those and make something that is of good quality of like the first two films. But then you get to this one, and a lot of people were thinking to themselves, why? Like, seriously, why are we making a sequel to this?
Was that it? Nope.
Twisters is directed by Isaac Chung with a screenplay by Mark L. Smith and a story by Joesph Kosinski. The film stars Daisy Edgar-Jones, Glen Powell, Anthony Ramos, Brendan Perea, Maura, Tierney, and Sasha Lane. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, Kate Carter, a retired tornado chaser and meteorologist, is persuaded to return to Oklahoma to work with a new team and new technologies. Twister is a 90s gem of a film. It's easily one of the better disaster movies, even to this day. People still love it. Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, rest in peace. People enjoy this movie and people just see it as a singular film and people can appreciate that film. That being said, when there was an announcement that there would be a sequel to the 96 film, people, including myself, thought this was pointless, especially since how we usually see sequels today to older movies. Now, I'm not saying I agree, but I'm just saying what I see a lot of people usually kind of feeling is they usually see them as disappointments or kind of frustrating because sometimes sequels do things that kind of frustrates the audience or kind of does the same old that audiences have seen with legacy sequels to older movies, or at the very least a remake of some kind. But I can say, thankfully, that's not for me the case with this movie. And I will say there are still some issues with the film, but for me, here are the positives that I saw with the movie. The performances are fun. Daisy Edgar-Jones is delightful and torn as Kate Carter, a meteorologist and former storm chaser. Jones knows how to balance the inner turmoil of her past and focusing on helping her friend with tornadoes in the present. Jones does, I think, a good job of balancing both the problems that she has dealt with at the beginning of the movie. You see what causes her trauma with what happened to her, and she's kind of stuck. She kind of feels like she is still feeling regretful and terrible of what happened to her and her friends, and still trying to be in the present of helping one of her friend who was asking for her help with regards to tornadoes that are still ravaging Oklahoma. And you could really tell that Jones just knows how to balance just that inner turmoil very well. Glen Powell is charming and likable as Tyler Owens, an internet famous storm chaser and meteorologist. Powell plays Owens as a cowboy who approaches tornadoes differently than other storm chasers and does it for the fame. Glen Powell to me is just having the time of his life with this movie, and you could tell how much that he is just happy to be playing a cowboy in this, because he seems like somebody who would be very much in the vein of wanting to be a storm chaser, but just doing it in his own flair, his own fashion, and for that, I think he's a ton of fun in the film. Anthony Ramos is loyal and determined as Javi, Kate's friend and former storm chaser colleague. Ramos plays Javi as a man who wants to chase these tornadoes to get information to save people's lives. It's kind of similar to Helen Hunt, Dr. Joe Harding, and Anthony Ramos is always just a delight, and he's always got that like charisma and charm, just like how Glen Powell has that. He also brings that too. He brings a sense of loyalty because as a friend of Kate, he wants to be there for her, but also trying to convince her to help him on his pursuits and trying to help him out. And I do think that Anthony Ramos does bring a lot of charisma and charm to the movie. Well, so we got double the amount of that. Both Jones, Powell, and Ramos are excellent with each other. They have great chemistry together, especially between Jones and Powell. These two must have had a blast working with one another on this set because you could tell by the chemistry between the two of them that they just kind of riffed off each other so well. And Jones and Ramos also does that as well. But with really Jones and Powell, they just magnetically connect with one another. But all three of them, when they do interact, whether it be Jones and Powell or Powell with Ramos and Ramos with Jones, it works. They work very naturally into the movie and they are a good addition to this series. The direction is solid. Director Isaac Chung really captures the spirit of the previous film, but for modern day audiences, it doesn't feel like a rehash because this could have easily come off as being another legacy sequel that you see a lot of the times, and thankfully that's not the case. Isaac Chung does bring that nature of what made Twister such a fun disaster movie and brings it to modern day, and he does it in a way that is being respectful and also not feeling like a copy and paste of the original, but just the essence of what makes not just Twister, but just as a disaster movie an all around fun time. And I think he does that well, especially with those tornado sequences that happens. I think he does a really good job of knowing when to make it fun, but also intensifying it, just like how Jan de Bont did with the original Twister. The cinematography is amazing. Cinematographer Dan Mendel shows the chaotic nature of these tornadoes and the beauty of Oklahoma. It all looks stunning. Just like with the original Twister with Jack and Green's cinematography, Dan Mendel does the same thing here and is with the latest technology with regards to camera work as well as visual effects. And so with that, I think he does do a good job, just like what Jack and Green did with the first film, in capturing what makes these tornadoes so deadly, so dangerous, and so scary to be around, but also showing how Oklahoma is and really showing some love and passion to that state as a whole. The music is enjoyable. Composer Benjamin Wallfish does a decent job of having orchestral and country music mixed into the movie because the original didn't have a lot of country music. It had kind of more of like a rock type of score to it, but still had orchestral music. This one does lean into it being country, and I think it does do well. For me, though, the licensed music isn't really like my favorite. I'm not really huge into like country pop that much. It's just not my thing. I know people my age really love it. I'm just not one. But it didn't ruin the movie for me. I get it. It's for a modern day audience. You have to have music that people my age or people today kind of listen to with regards to country, especially since you have it set in Oklahoma. So you would want to have an element of what do people today listen to, and it's country pop, country rock in a way. And it's not my favorite, but again, it doesn't hurt the movie for me. It's just whatever, it's fine. The production is incredible, trying to capture the vibes of the original but making it for audiences today. It truly feels like they wanted to be as respectful but also paying tribute to what made Twister such a fun time and showing audiences what Twister was like for people back in 1996 but for today. It's a blending of old and new school altogether. I think they do successfully do that in that regard. The story is exciting. Aside from the premise, the story doesn't do the obvious sequel tropes that you usually kind of see in sequels. Like originally Helen Hunt was tasked with directing a sequel to Twister at one point, and that it was going to focus on her and Bill Paxton's child and whatnot. That's usually kind of what you expect a lot of times with sequels, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just that it's kind of the thing that you do kind of expect nowadays. But following Kate, Tyler, and Javi was entertaining. I think they are good additions. I think they do add some sort of charm, as well as Tyler's crew. I have to say, Tyler's crew, I would say, compared to the original crew, much better because at the very least they're a lot fun to hang around and they are a little bit different from one another compared to Joe Harding's crew because they just don't really stand out that much other than besides like, what, two people. The pacing runtime works. The movie, like the original, never slows down or drags on. With runtime of 2 hours and 2 minutes, it works out very well. It doesn't feel like it negates the runtime. It doesn't extend it by any sort of means. I think it just knows when to show the film and know when to bug out. And for that, I think that works in the movie's favor, especially with it being a disaster movie. You don't want it to go as long as it can be. I did, however, find some hiccups with this movie that I found with it. So here are the negatives that I saw. The visuals can vary at certain points. From far away, it all looks good. It all looks amazing. I'm not going to deny that. It does look visually beautiful. When it gets close, however, to the characters, that's when I start to kind of feel like it does dip into not being always that great and can come off as at sometimes very noticeable at certain points. The storm part car subplot feels kind of pointless. This is the team that Javi recruits Kate to help join him and them as well. Because when the film talks about Stormpar's like investors like involvement, like there's an investor in this film. He's not in the movie that much, or rather, I don't even think he's in the film, but he's mentioned in like what Stormpar does. And I do think there's an interesting concept and a good commentary on what they talk about with natural disasters and what investors do with regards to damages to small towns or cities, that what they do is kind of messed up. But I kind of also feel like it doesn't lead to much, or it doesn't go anywhere. It's just kind of mentioned and it just doesn't go any farther than that. And the third act, to me, does feel a little unnecessary. Not necessarily like what drives Kate and what she's trying to do. Rather, once they kind of solve Kate's problems that hurt her in the past, when it gets to Kate and Tyler and Javi trying to help a town out with like evacuating, that's where I kind of start to feel like it tacked on by the end, because it just feels like the film has to end on this big, massive scale note in a way that is like crazy bombastic and showing how much these tornadoes ravage things, even though we've been seeing it throughout most of the film. It just kind of feels like it just didn't necessarily need to end on that way. It's not a bad ending by any means, because I did find myself enjoying it, but it does start to kind of feel like, for me, it feels like a last minute addition to the film. Then it does feel like an ending that feels right to the movie. It's on par for me with the first film, which is a good thing. It makes for a thrilling ride that modern audiences can enjoy. Aside from its problems, it treats the series with respect and care, and I am at the very least happy that this sequel did turn out as good as it can, because this could have easily gone badly in so many ways, but thankfully it was a fun ride. I enjoyed it, so I'm going to give Twisters 7 out of 10. It's a fun one. It's definitely, of course, on equal with the original, which is good. I think that's a good sign, because, you know, if it had been better, that's fine, but if it had been worse, that would have been completely terrible. So thankfully, it lands just right where the original is. Now I'm going to be moving on to the Deadpool movies, and then July can be over with. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.